6 years ago, the Queen's 90th birthday, there were 15 working royals. Those are members of the family who appear on behalf of the sovereign at events. Charles has previously suggested he wants to reduce that to just 8 senior members for financial and practical reasons. Now, Camilla is Queen Consort, so she is one of those 8 automatically.
The royal halls have seen their fair share of secrets, but nothing prepared Princess Anne and young Prince George for what they discovered hidden inside Queen Camilla's private bedroom. What started as an innocent visit quickly turned into a shocking revelation that has left the monarchy and the public utterly stunned. Was it a forgotten relic, a coded message, or something far more scandalous? One thing's for sure, this discovery could rewrite everything we thought we knew about Queen Camilla's place in the royal legacy. And now, the truth can no longer be hidden.
The British monarch has given her blessing for Prince Charles' wife Camilla to be called Queen Consort.
A royal walk and an unthinkable discovery. What began as an ordinary stroll through Clarence House in early May 2025 has now become a story that could challenge the very core of the British monarchy. The discussion around a modernized, trimmed-down royal family has grown louder in recent months. Calls for fewer senior royals, streamlined duties, and a tighter public image. Yet, while many have championed this shift, Princess Anne, a stalwart of the institution, has stood firmly against it. She insists every member plays a crucial role in preserving royal tradition. But behind closed doors, something much deeper and far more unsettling has been unearthed. During what was supposed to be a routine visit to Queen Camilla's quarters, Princess Anne and young Prince George happened upon something entirely unexpected. Their presence wasn't meant to be intrusive. They weren't prying or looking for secrets. But as they entered Camilla's bedroom, what they discovered in the quiet corner of a drawer brought the air in the room to a standstill. There, neatly folded but aged, was a handwritten letter from Frances Shand Kydd, Princess Diana's mother. This was no ordinary note. It was personal, emotional, and filled with revelations that had never before reached public ears. The letter detailed Diana's final months within the royal family, her heartbreak, her solitude, and her growing sense of isolation behind palace walls. Though Diana was cherished by the public, Frances wrote of a woman suffering in silence, drifting through a world that never truly embraced her pain. Why this letter, so private, so piercing, was found in Queen Camilla's possession remains the burning question. Was it preserved as a painful memento, hidden deliberately, forgotten over time? None of those answers makes the discovery any less explosive. Given Camilla's long-standing efforts to reframe her public image and distance herself from the controversies of the past, this revelation threatens to pull her back into the most painful chapter of the royal story. For Prince George, heir to a modern monarchy, this was more than a surprise. It was a moment of reckoning. As the next generation quietly watches the decisions of today, what lessons do they carry forward? For Princess Anne, who has long upheld the dignity and unity of the crown, this letter called even the oldest allegiances into question. To fully grasp the weight of this letter, we must understand Frances Shand Kydd not just as Diana's mother, but as a woman shaped by aristocratic duty and personal grief. Though her bond with Diana was strained, this letter read like a final confession, perhaps even a desperate attempt at closure. But what hidden pain did Diana's mother, Frances Shand Kydd, carry from palace halls to personal heartbreak? Keep watching to uncover the untold journey behind the letter. The quiet storm behind the smile. To understand the emotional depth of the letter found in Queen Camilla's room, one must first understand the woman who wrote it, Frances Shand Kydd. Born into privilege at Park House on the Sandringham estate on January 20th, 1936, Frances was no stranger to royal life. From her very first breath, she lived in the inner circle of the monarchy. Her mother, Ruth Roche, served as lady-in-waiting to Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, and her father, Maurice Roche, 4th Baron Fermoy, was a personal friend of King George V. Frances was not simply a bystander to royal tradition. She was bred into it. Raised in a world of formality and expectation, Frances carried the title, the Honorable, from childhood. She was taught to smile graciously, speak softly, and never under any circumstances bring private matters into public light. Behind the dazzling pearls and perfectly pressed skirts, however, was a young woman wrestling with the weight of a life she never truly chose. At just 18, Frances made headlines. On June 1, 1954, she married John Spencer, Viscount Althorp, at Westminster Abbey, a ceremony attended by Queen Elizabeth II herself. The union was splashed across newspapers as the grand wedding of a noble beauty to a future earl, cementing Frances's place in one of Britain's most esteemed families. She became the youngest woman to marry in the Abbey in half a century, stepping into a role that carried both glamour and an unspoken burden. On the surface, Frances had it all: wealth, status, and a future as Countess Spencer. But beneath the surface, she felt smothered by strict rules and a cold sense of duty. Then came Peter Shand Kydd, a wealthy Australian wallpaper magnate she met in 1966. He was charming, worldly, and different from anyone she'd known. Their connection was instant and dangerous. In 1967, Frances did the unthinkable. She left her husband and filed for divorce, shattering the image of the obedient, aristocratic wife. In a time when divorce, especially among the upper class, was still considered taboo, her decision made headlines and shocked the establishment. With 4 young children, one of them being Diana, the press and public turned their focus on her, not with sympathy, but with scrutiny. The fierce custody battle that followed wasn't the freedom Frances had hoped for. It turned her pain into a national spectacle, leaving scars that would follow her and her children for decades. The wound that never healed. But the cost of Frances Shand Kydd's rebellion didn't end with public disgrace or court headlines. It reached deeper, into the fragile heart of a child. When Frances left the Spencer family home in 1967, she believed she was escaping a life that stifled her. What she didn't anticipate was how that decision would tear her daughter Diana's world apart. The betrayal came sharply into focus during a dramatic custody battle in 1969 at the London Family Division Court. In a shocking twist, Frances's mother, Ruth Roche, Lady Fermoy, testified against her daughter. Ruth claimed that John Spencer was the more stable and capable parent, turning what was already a deeply personal family fracture into a brutal public wound. The courtroom atmosphere reportedly turned tense and chaotic, the betrayal echoing louder than any gavel. The judge ruled in John Spencer's favor. He was awarded full custody of all 4 children: Sarah, Jane, Charles, and Diana. Frances lost everything: her marriage, her social position, and now her children. For Diana, who was just 6 years old at the time, it was a heartbreak she couldn't understand. One day her mother was tucking her in, gently stroking her hair, and the next, she was gone. No warning, no explanation that a child could grasp. Diana would carry that scar for the rest of her life. It seeped into her relationships, her mental well-being, and her sense of self-worth. Years later, she would confide in friends, "It felt like she left me." In public, Diana would become the people's princess, but behind the palace walls, she remained a woman struggling to believe she was truly loved. Though Diana loved her father, she longed for a mother's warmth, something she felt had been stolen from her. Whenever Frances re-entered her life, there was tension, an awkward mix of love, resentment, and unspoken sadness. Every encounter between them was tinged with history that neither could fully erase. Diana craved closeness, but the chasm created by years of absence never truly closed. Then came another blow. In 1976, John Spencer married Rain, Countess of Dartmouth, a glamorous, sharp-tongued socialite, and daughter of romantic novelist Barbara Cartland. Diana, then a teenager, clashed fiercely with her new stepmother. She reportedly called her acid rain, a jab at her perceived coldness and disconnect. With this new presence in her father's home, Diana felt further pushed out. The house that once held her childhood memories now felt foreign and unwelcoming. Meanwhile, Frances's second marriage was crumbling. By 1988, her relationship with Peter Shand Kydd had deteriorated beyond repair. He eventually left her, returning to his former wife. The woman who had risked everything for love was once again left behind. But what happens when a mother loses her children to divorce, only to watch one become the future queen? A crowned daughter? A silent rift. The unraveling of Frances Shand Kydd's second marriage left her in solitude once more, but fate had one last twist in store. In February 1981, her daughter Diana, now 19, became engaged to Prince Charles, the heir to the British throne. Practically overnight, Frances was thrust back into the public spotlight she had long tried to leave behind. The same aristocracy that had quietly cast her aside now turned its gaze back to her, this time as the mother of the future Queen of England. It was a strange kind of justice, laced with irony and emotional distance. For Frances, it felt surreal. The child she had once lost to court orders and cold tradition was now poised to rule the very system that had rejected them both. Yet, beneath the fairy tale narrative sold to the public, the truth remained far more complicated. The mother-daughter bond that had once been severed never fully healed. Though Frances attended the royal wedding on July 29, 1981 at St. Paul's Cathedral, seat among dignitaries and royalty, she was more a guest than a mother, watching from a distance as Diana was swept into a life of palaces, protocols, and pressure. As Diana's marriage slowly began to fracture, Frances could see echoes of her own life in her daughter's pain. Emotional coldness from a spouse, the crushing weight of public expectation, and the isolating nature of royal life. But unlike Frances, Diana didn't walk away. She stayed not for herself, but for her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, and for the hope that things might change.
I don't always read that. People very willing to tell me that.
Despite sensing the emotional storms Diana was weathering, Frances remained on the outside. Their contact was minimal, their bond strained by years of unspoken pain and differing choices. In 1997, after Diana's very public divorce from Prince Charles, Frances gave an interview to Hello magazine. In it, she commented that Diana was relieved to give up her title of Her Royal Highness. But instead of feeling understood, Diana felt betrayed again. That single comment shattered the fragile relationship they had left. Diana, furious and deeply hurt, never spoke to her mother again. The silence stretched on, unbroken, until tragedy struck. On August 31, 1997, Diana was killed in a car crash in Paris. The grief that followed was immense, but for Frances, it carried an even sharper edge. There had been no last conversation, no resolution, only silence. Overwhelmed by guilt and loss, Frances released a handwritten note to the public, thanking them for their kindness. In it, she wrote with trembling grace, "With pride, love, and admiration, I return her to him, so that she may rest in peace." The whisper behind closed doors. Frances's sorrowful farewell had barely settled into memory when another royal stir began to brew. One rooted not in the past but in the ever-complicated present. It started quietly, almost too quietly, over a simple lunchtime visit at Clarence House. Princess Anne, always clear-eyed and duty-bound, arrived with a sense of purpose. Her bond with her brother, King Charles III, was unshakable. But in recent months, Anne had begun to notice the subtle shifts within the palace walls. Camilla's growing authority, her increasingly private routines, and above all, the mounting concern around Charles's health, whispered yet never confirmed. The king had been stepping back from several royal duties, citing fatigue and needing rest. In his place, Camilla had become more visible, more decisive, and, some would argue, more powerful. To outsiders, it looked like a natural transition. But Anne, who had witnessed enough palace reshuffles in her life to know when something felt off, wasn't convinced. When Queen Camilla began canceling public engagements, citing exhaustion, alarm bells rang for Anne. She didn't trust easily, and she certainly didn't leave questions unanswered when it came to the crown. It was on a cool Saturday afternoon in early spring at Windsor that Anne decided to visit Camilla's private quarters without formal notice. She wasn't alone. Accompanying her was young Prince George, just 11, who had spent the weekend under Anne's wing. The two had grown unexpectedly close. George, curious and thoughtful beyond his years, found Anne's honesty refreshing. She, in turn, saw in George the makings of a monarch who might someday need to understand truths not found in history books. Camilla's rooms were strangely silent. For someone known to keep her space open and informal, the locked doors and drawn curtains felt unnatural. A chambermaid, hesitant but pressed by Anne's steady voice, revealed that Queen Camilla had left earlier that morning for her private estate, Mill House in Wiltshire, and without her usual staff. This raised eyebrows. Mill House had always been Camilla's retreat, separate from official royal residences, but to leave so abruptly without even a note left behind was unlike her. The stillness inside Clarence House, especially in Camilla's section, was not just eerie, it was almost calculated. Anne and George exchanged looks, each sensing something bigger was unfolding. The palace may have been quiet, but the air was thick with the weight of something unspoken. What they were about to find, hidden behind the walls of a room that hadn't been touched since Camilla's sudden departure, would lead to a discovery neither of them had anticipated. But what did Princess Anne and Prince George uncover in Queen Camilla's abandoned room that shook the palace's silence? Buckle up, this changes everything. The chest, that time forgot. As the quiet moments stretched on inside Queen Camilla's deserted quarters, Princess Anne's instinct grew sharper. Something was undeniably wrong. The silence wasn't ordinary. It was deliberate. The room, sealed off and untouched, carried none of the warmth or daily rhythm one would expect from an occupied royal suite. No fresh-cut flowers adorned the table. No half-finished teacups sat on the windowsill. The air held only a faint trace of lavender, and even that seemed to linger from a different time. Anne, unwilling to let the strange feeling pass, summoned the palace steward. With a nod of authority few would question, she requested the master key. As second-born but never second in command when it came to resolving, Anne unlocked the chamber door herself. She stepped inside slowly, with young Prince George close behind her, his eyes scanning every detail with the quiet curiosity of someone too young to know what to expect, yet old enough to sense when something wasn't right. The room's stillness was almost theatrical, velvet drapes drawn tight, the light barely filtering in. And then, behind a faded dressing screen in the far corner, George spotted something, a large, aged trunk, secured by a worn brass clasp. Its wood was darkened with time, and dust had settled across the top, but the faint engraving still shone through. He looked closer, eyes widening. "DS," he murmured aloud. "Diana Spencer." Anne's breath caught. "George, step back," she said firmly, her voice steady but tight. She walked toward the trunk with deliberate steps, taking a pair of lace gloves from Camilla's vanity before handling the old lock. With a soft creak, the trunk opened. Inside, time stood still. There, folded and preserved as if waiting to be rediscovered, lay dozens of deeply personal items that hadn't seen the light of day since Princess Diana's tragic passing in 1997. Letters written in her flowing, emotional handwriting, private journals filled with thoughts too raw for public view, black and white photographs capturing unscripted moments, laughing with her sons, gazing out from palace windows, even solitary walks that spoke of a quieter, unseen life. There were souvenirs too, small keepsakes, like a ballet program with notes in the margins, a pressed flower in a book, and a tiny music box that still played a soft lullaby when opened. Anne gently pulled out one envelope, its edges yellowed but sealed with a wax crest. She didn't open it. Not yet. George stood silent, understanding somehow that this wasn't just about the past. It was a hidden part of his family's story, and one that was never meant to be found in Camilla's room. Whispers from the past. Anne didn't move. The air around her felt thick with history, heavy with questions that no one had ever dared to ask aloud. Prince George, still standing a few steps behind her, watched her face closely, as if trying to read the storm of thoughts brewing behind her steady eyes. Among the carefully preserved letters, one sat slightly apart, folded with an eerie kind of urgency. George picked it up gently. The handwriting was unmistakably Diana's, the words addressed, "To my sons," in case anything ever happens to me." The gravity of it hit like a chill down the spine. This was no ordinary letter. This was a warning wrapped in love, a desperate attempt to reach across time. Anne read on, pulling out another note.
Pleasure of sitting next to you before, and I thought perhaps you decided that as you knew what is in store, you decided to go elsewhere.
Dated just months before the fatal crash in Paris in August 1997, it was penned in crimson ink, an unmistakable signal of importance. This one, addressed to Queen Elizabeth II, was deeply personal, yet laced with concern. Diana wrote of feeling watched, of hearing clicks on her phone line, and sensing a shadow always trailing her. She confessed to a fear that she might never live long enough to see William and Harry grow into men. Her words were full of longing and dread. Anne's fingers stiffened. If these letters were real, if these were indeed Diana's final reflections, then how had they ended up here? In Camilla's private quarters? There was no official archive sticker, no protective case, no royal seal, just raw, exposed fragments of a woman who had suffered alone. And that made the discovery all the more disturbing. The possibilities were few and troubling. Had Camilla taken them in the chaos following Diana's death? Back when her personal belongings were quickly removed from Kensington Palace, during a period riddled with confusion, mourning, and unanswered questions? Or worse, had someone from within Diana's circle passed them on willingly? Perhaps even Charles himself. The thought sat uneasily with Anne. Charles, haunted by guilt and determined to make peace with the past, might have believed Camilla deserved to see Diana's truth, but giving her these letters, the ones meant for her sons, for her mother-in-law, it felt like crossing a line too sacred to touch. And if they were meant to be preserved, why had Camilla hidden them away? Not stored with care or donated to the royal archives, but locked in a private room, untouched, unspoken of. And why, after all this time, had she left so abruptly, abandoning them like forgotten luggage? Anne turned to George, her voice quiet. "These weren't meant to be lost," she said. But the question still hovered in the air, unspoken and sharp. Who had betrayed Diana again? But what secrets did Princess Anne and Prince George uncover in Queen Camilla's hidden room? And who truly betrayed Diana again? The truth might be more shocking than anyone imagined. The photograph that spoke louder than silence. The room remained hushed, as if the walls themselves were listening. Anne reached deeper into the old chest, her fingers brushing against a worn manila envelope sealed tightly. The words, "Private, do not open," eyes only stamped across it in faded black ink. Her heart pounded, her instincts sharpened. Without a word, she unfastened the seal. Prince George stood close now, eyes wide and watchful, the weight of inheritance dawning slowly across his young face. Inside were photographs, images the public had never seen, snaps of Diana laughing with William and Harry in the Highgrove Gardens, barefoot in the grass, carefree and radiant. But one photo made Anne's hands tremble. It was taken just weeks before Diana's tragic death in Paris on August 31st, 1997. She stood alone in a corridor at Clarence House. Her smile was absent, her eyes distant, hollow almost. Beside her, partially cropped out, stood another woman, her arm unmistakably adorned with a gold bracelet, the one Camilla had worn for decades. Anne's breath caught. What was Camilla doing there? Had they met in secret? What passed between them, if anything? She turned to George, whose face was pale. "What made Queen Camilla keep these?" he asked softly. Anne had no answer. Neither did anyone else in the palace. Later that day, the silence that had settled over Windsor broke like glass. Word reached King Charles. Camilla was quietly summoned. There was no official statement, no televised apology, only a stifled storm behind closed doors. Insiders whispered of a fierce exchange between Anne and her brother. She demanded to know why the contents had been hidden for so long. Camilla's voice reportedly quivered when she replied, "I kept them out of fear. I didn't take them to harm anyone. I wanted to understand her, to make peace." Peace, perhaps. But to Anne and many others, it felt like possession. And that line, too, had been crossed. Prince William, stunned, insisted that every item be returned to his mother's estate. Harry, informed by Anne from afar, reportedly said nothing at all, but his silence spoke volumes. The press, as expected, exploded. Headlines screamed, "Diana's secret diaries found in Camilla's room and Princess Anne exposes royal truth." The public reaction was swift. Old suspicions about Camilla's role in Diana's life and legacy were reignited. Sympathy swelled once more for the woman many still called the people's princess. Diana's words, thoughts, and deepest wounds had resurfaced. The pain she had once buried in pages now echoed through the palace. Anne, ever steadfast, decided it could not end in silence again. Plans quietly began. Select letters might one day be released to the public with William's approval. The world deserved to hear Diana's voice again. But in the heart of it all, one thing remained clear. The truth had not been destroyed. It had only been hidden. Until a boy and his great-aunt opened a chest that refused to stay closed. But what more do you think Queen Camilla was hiding in that sealed chest? And why was Diana's final photo with her kept secret for so long? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe and comment below.